Hi, and welcome to Wrong Way! And today I share with you my knowledge on how to safely ride and navigate through traffic and through public spaces on an electric wheel. So let me tell you more about it. Wrong Way! But before we get into the video and into the 6 categories I wanted to talk about, I wanted to mention that still the most dangerous vehicle on the road is the car. And I wanted to just bring awareness to that, and the most people in Europe in traffic accidents are either killed by car or heavier traffic. So keep that in mind. Years ago I was also, a fan of cars and I was a petrol head, but now I've come to the conclusion that devices like these, like the electric unicycle, walking, cycling, taking a scooter, or taking a train is much more safer and also environmentally friendly. Still, the most hurt and the most stress, the most noise pollution and the most space taken away from people is by cars. So if you want to change the world and make this world a better place for us all, I highly suggest checking out channels like Not Just Bikes, or there's also a couple cool videos by Adam Something, or Climate Town, a really cool video recently I saw about car dependency, which might be also interesting to you. Nevertheless, there are some things to keep in mind when you ride a wheel like this in traffic, so in this video I'm going to talk about it. Also, I encourage you to take a part in public votes, maybe in protests of cyclists or pedestrians, because essentially this is more of a bicycle in terms of, space or speed than a car for sure. And therefore, wherever you could ride a bike at the same speed, you should also be able to ride a electric unicycle. And I will continue to also join in on protests to make these things more legal, especially instead of taking car and relieving us from the car dependency that we have in our current times, especially in North America. So with that said, let's get into the video. And as I said before, there's 6 categories I wanted to talk about. First, we're going to talk about the different kinds of entities you will encounter on the road. So cars or trucks, pedestrians. Then we might talk about the different routes you might use, so either to take a road or a cycling path, or sometimes even a sidewalk, and what are the nuances about that. And then we're going to talk about the different times of day for riding and how this influences your safety in public space. Afterwards, we're going to talk about the weather conditions: rain, snow, sunlight, or overcast weather. And finally, we're going to talk about the safety on group rides and what you need to think about then. And maybe last but not least, some accessories that help improve your safety in day-to-day use of a wheel like this. Now I'll try to make this video as condensed as possible, so it's not too long to watch. And if you have any questions, or if you have any additional things to consider regarding the safety of using such an electric wheel on the street, please comment below. And of course, subscribe if you didn't already. All right, so let's get into it. First, I wanted to talk about the different entities you will encounter on the road or in public space. And first up, I wanted to talk about the car, and lorries and bigger trucks, buses, etc., etc. So first up, cars can be very speedy, and speed produces danger, loudness, and possible injury. So you need to really watch out for cars, especially on intersections and when using the road. If for any reason you might be involved in an accident, please, when you fell or when you hurt yourself, just stay on the ground for a while. Please don't go riding right away after you fell. Wait on the ground for a little, lay on it. After a while, maybe try sitting down and check what's up with your body. You might have a lot of adrenaline and don't even feel the pain. And this is really a mistake that might happen, especially for beginner riders, because you might think that, oh, I'm all right, I'll just go. Turns out you have a broken arm. It's really that serious. So if you're in an accident, wait. Make a picture perhaps of the car if it wants to, you know, drive away and do just like a hit and run. In any other case, call an ambulance or call the police if the other driver involved didn't do that, and just wait it out and see what the police says and what the ambulance says. Even if it's, you know, semi-legal to write those things in your country, it's important to have the data to see who is, you know, at fault and how we can improve infrastructure to make riding light vehicles like this safer. And recently, sadly, there were 2 accidents that happened, one in the USA and one in Poland. I don't know the rider in the USA, but I feel very sorry for you. I know that this is a very traumatic experience and it's very scary. And also for Jarek, who is actually part of the Warsaw Street Riders. He was smashed by a car here in Warsaw and now he's in a hospital. He will need to recover for, sadly, a long time. So cars, just please slow down and check what's happening. There's way less harm coming from a small vehicle like this, which is nimble, where you can see everything. There's no B-pillars, and you are way more safer in a car with airbags and all of that weight than in an electric unicycle. You have just a, you know, helmet and your basic gear. Also, always wear your safety gear. But I digress. In terms of communication with drivers on the road, try to maintain eye contact when crossing streets, or even wave with your hand to make sure that they see you. And this is a very practical thing I learned. Usually when I wave, it's just like a human instinct to just brake and acknowledge that someone is coming. So if you see that you're going close to the intersection and, you know, a driver isn't slowing down, just wave. And this helps a lot, sometimes even with 2 hands, and then they brake. You might also encounter situations where a driver might cut you off, or a driver just stopped in the middle of a bike lane. In the first case, it's best to record such footage and then forward it to the police, because just being angry with a driver doesn't help really much. And in case of somebody staying on a bike lane, especially if someone is inside, just stand behind the driver and wait until he goes away. If it takes a long time, then maybe ask him what's happening, why is he here, and politely remind him that, well, this is a bike lane, I'm not standing on the street, why are you standing here? And usually, even 5 minutes or 10 minutes wasted or, you know, taken for such a conversation or wait makes the driver go away, and maybe even due to this learning experience won't do that again. I use this pretty much all of the time when I'm riding through the city. I'm standing behind a car if it's parked on a bike lane until it goes away. Recently I did that for like 15 or 20 minutes in the rain, and finally the dude went away and hopefully won't do that again. Usually peace of mind and stoicism is the best answer here. No need to get angry. Just record your footage if, you know, the car might get away quickly. Just take your time and educate people. In terms of the interaction with cars in public space, usually the biggest amount of problems occurs either on a shared bike path, which is like shared with the road, or on intersections. So keep in mind that, you know, if you don't see, for example, a blinker on the car, but the driver is sort of swerving to the side, or if you see that on an intersection a car isn't slowing down, just leave yourself a good amount of headroom or distance to brake in time. And ideally, it's not really advised to overtake people on the bike lane, which is on the right, when there is also a turn for cars, because usually drivers are unaware of that, or they're not well educated for that, and accidents might happen. So usually it's best to keep a safe distance and keep in mind that this driver might want to hit me or might want to bully me with a horn or forcefully go against the rules just to show his dominance with his bigger car, which is of course terrible, but in order to keep you safe, I'm telling you about this. Another issue that happens on shared bike lanes with the road is dooring. So if you have a bike lane that is really close to a line of cars parked on the side of the road, it's better to be further from the curb than closer, because if somebody opens the door, then you have still a bit of room to go on the street and avoid it. Dooring is very terrible and dangerous, and ideally it's best to avoid such cycling paths. In terms of all of these issues with cars, the quickest and the lowest stress remedy is just to not go on shared bike lanes with roads or on the roads. I found myself using bicycle lanes and shared paths with pedestrians way more often now, just because I don't need to speed, I don't need to be hyper reactive and hyper conscious about everything that's happening around me. It's way more chill. So if in your city there is a proposal or a infrastructure change for a cycling path that is not shared with the road, then please go ahead and vote for that. With that said, that's everything about the car. Let's move on to the cyclists. And with the cyclists, there is a lot less issues. I found myself sharing the road with cyclists for 3 years now on electric unicycles, and for most cases it's fine and problemless. There's a couple of things to keep in mind though, like for example, electric unicycles can be really fast, and it's really important to adjust your speed to the area and also to the road users. So if you're going, for example, 40 kilometers an hour and you see a cyclist that is slower, like 25, then it's better to slow down a little and overtake him slowly in order not to scare him and not to make much danger on the road. Simultaneously, it's also good to keep a safe distance, like with the cars, because sometimes cyclists don't show you the direction that they're going, or sometimes they just brake or they make a U-turn or suddenly they just merge into the cycling lane. So just keep your speed low in those busy areas. Possibly if you overtake or if you make some sort of a maneuver, keep a big distance to the cyclists. And it's also good to have a bell either on your finger or on your ESC to notify that you are either overtaking, or if there's two cyclists in front of you, just use the bell or clap with your wrist guards to notify that you're coming, and they should get out of the way. Eye contact, just like with car drivers, is very helpful, and from time to time also look back if some sort of speedy cyclist doesn't want to overtake you. And one last thing to keep in mind, if you are not sure about overtaking on a cycling lane, and the same thing applies to the road, just don't do it. If there is a turn or if there is a pedestrian path crossing the cycling path, just take your time and just overtake in moments that are safe. And same thing, if something happens and for some reason you will fall or a cyclist will fall, just take your time, take it easy, talk about it, exchange contact numbers. I sadly recently was in an accident with a cyclist, but it was entirely my fault. So I stopped, I talked with him, and I asked if he's fine. I gave him my contact details, and I paid for the issues he had with his bike. The thing I was trying to do is go in between two cyclists because they were kind of far apart, so I thought it would be funny. But sadly at this moment, one cyclist just swerved into me a little because he wasn't holding the handlebar, and I touched his handlebar. So it was entirely my fault, and I admit to that, and it was a stupid move. So of course I exchanged numbers, I exchanged details, I paid for the issues he had, and that's how we can solve problems in a civilized and nice way. When it comes to pedestrians, usually across the globe they have the right of way, and I think they should have the right of way on sidewalks, side paths, and also crossings over cycling paths. So if there's any crossing that you see that people are going close to, or they want to cross the cycling lane or the road, then just brake for them. It really is a nice gesture, and you should do it. And sometimes also cyclists don't do it because then it's harder to pedal and get up to speed again, whilst on EUC it's really easy. So always brake for pedestrians, and if you're in a low speed area like, you know, a sidewalk, then just match the speed of the pedestrians and watch for, you know, any doors, exits from restaurants, shops, and just keep your speed low and respect others there. Last thing to keep in mind here, sometimes cars might be parked very weirdly on the road, and usually other car drivers don't care about that and they zip through anyways. But I think it's important to note that if there's an intersection and you can't really see because the view is obstructed, just slow down and see if there's anyone who wants to cross the street. And more often than not, I see people that actually want to cross the street, and especially with electric unicycles that are, you know, quieter than cars, they might not be aware that something is coming. So in essence, always look out for pedestrians, because in the end, we are all pedestrians. Okay, with that said, let's move into the next category, and these are the road or route types. When it comes to riding on the road, there is a few things to keep in mind. First up, know the legality of riding EUC on road in your country, and maybe even more importantly, know the enforcement of these laws. But then if you go on a faster route, like 50 kilometers an hour, don't go into the gutter. Like, don't drive on the line basically of the end of the road, because that's where you will see the most amount of potholes, the most amount of danger, and drivers will use this opportunity to speed past you when they have not enough room to overtake you on the other lane. And this might lead to, you know, very, very frightening experiences where people overtake you with like 10 centimeters of safe distance, which is not safe distance, 10 centimeters of distance. And I think that the best lesson for drivers would be to just put them on a EUC and see how it is. I saw a pretty cool video about lessons for bus drivers where they were put on bicycles while other buses were zooming past them. So check this out, this is really cool. Nevertheless, in optimal conditions, just be in the middle of the road. If it's like a, you know, 30 to 50 kilometer an hour road, or if it's a faster route, maybe use up 1/3 of the lane just to make overtaking a slightly a bit easier, but also not dangerous for you. Nevertheless, the road will be always dangerous, sadly, because of cars. But to decrease the amount of stress on the road, it's best to match the speed with cars. So if it's a 50 kilometer an hour road, it's best to go 50 kilometers an hour. If it's a faster road, you can go even faster if your unicycle is capable of that, and if you feel safe enough going those speeds. It's really cool to have also a mirror or look back from time to time to see if anyone is coming. And if there is some sort of pedestrian crossing where you see someone is crossing, or if there's a light, it's best to also keep your hands out when you are braking, because drivers might not be able to see that you are braking, and this helps a lot. Another thing to keep in mind is on the roads which are shared with bicycle lanes, there might be some sort of curb in between those two lanes. So don't switch crisscross between those two, because that's how you might get into an accident, because sometimes there might be a pole sticking out or some sort of small curb. Believe me, I learned it the hard way. Nevertheless, if the drivers are well behaved and there is no bullying, like honking, driving close to you at not safe distance, overtaking on small distance, on one-way roads or on roads where there is no overtaking that possible with slower speeds, riding electric unicycles is actually quite comfortable, because there's loads of room next to you and you can see really far ahead, a thing that is not often that good on bicycle paths. So if you have a EUC that is fast enough and the local streets are slow enough, actually it's pretty good to ride on the street. But keep in mind that there might be bullying from the drivers or from bus drivers, lorry drivers, and there might be danger included. So it's a bit of a mixed bag of potatoes. Definitely my favorite is the next one, which is bicycle paths. At least for, you know, speeds below, I don't know, 40 kilometers an hour, or the average speed of a, you know, cyclist or like a racing cyclist. So the first thing to keep in mind on the bicycle paths is that, you know, electric unicycles can be really speedy, and it's really important to adjust your speeds to the area where you're going at. So if it's a very busy area, it's probably not the best idea to go 50 kilometers an hour, even though this speed is legal on bicycles on this bicycle path. But when going out of the city and going through forests or, you know, empty suburban areas, then you can speed up a little. My point is just to respect others and have enough buffer zone to safely brake when something happens. Most notably, you have to watch out for crossings of pedestrians, which are not that easy to see on bicycle paths. So you have to keep in mind of pedestrian crossings, but also driveways. Sometimes drivers would just like pull up in front of you and this happens. So sometimes you don't have enough time to react, but it's again important to keep that buffer zone and also driveways when people want to go out of them. On crossings, even with lights, red, yellow, green, it's important to look if cars don't want to turn right on a, you know, green arrow or on a red light, which happens also a lot. So on intersections you have to watch out the most by far, because cars are the most dangerous here. Luckily for us, we are standing up really tall on electric unicycles and therefore we can see the situation relatively well. So this is a bonus of the electric unicycle, I guess. Last thing to keep in mind is more often than not, bicycle paths are used to throw anything on them. Like, it's way easier to find sand there, which you might slip on, both on, you know, bicycles and on electric unicycles. It's easier to find some road work, some trash even on the bike lane, parked cars. So sadly, the speed that is safe on bicycle paths is lower than on the road. So keep that in mind. Also, tree branches might be just, you know, low enough on the bike path to hit you in the head and cause you to fall. So it's best to have a full face helmet with goggles or either a visor down, because these things just hit you very randomly. Lastly, let's go on the sidewalk. And on the sidewalk, it's best to go slow. Some countries even implemented a rule that on the sidewalk you have to go under 6 kilometers an hour. And to some extent, I agree with that, especially in areas that are very dense and there's a lot of people. So on those sidewalks or pedestrian zones, please go slow. Don't do like a slalom in between people, because that is dangerous. Watch out for, you know, exits from restaurants, doors, curbs, and I think that on the sidewalk there's the most amount of bumps and irregular surfaces. So on the sidewalk, just go slow, unless it's like, you know, really empty and it's not like a busy part of town. I guess then you can speed up to speeds like on the bicycle lane. But in most cases, I avoid the sidewalk because it's just too crowded and a bit too dangerous for higher speed riding. So respect pedestrians, watch out for poles like me. No, not like me, because probably you don't have poles like me in your neighborhood. Or maybe you do, I don't know. Watch out for curbs, irregularities on the surface, speed bumps too, or like random stuff that is there. Typically, of all of those 3 types of routes, I choose the bicycle lane. I would most likely like to use it in Netherlands, but Netherlands forbids them. Change it, Netherlands. I'll say it in every video. You allow cars which kill people, but you don't allow this, which, I don't know, did it ever kill anyone? I don't think so. I want to live in the Netherlands, but I can't. With that said, let's move on to the next category, which is the time of day. First up, let's talk about sunrise and sunset. And I talk about those times specifically because especially in the northern hemisphere in the winter, those might actually take a while. And in this time, it's of course better to ride with the sun behind you, because you won't get blinded by it. But you need to keep in mind that on crossings, if you cross the road on a bicycle path, drivers might not be thoughtful enough to slow down and match their speed the circumstances outside. So if the sun is blinding a driver, he is less likely to see you crossing the path. So especially in the morning on crossings with the road or going on the road, keep that in mind. Maybe use additional lighting to make you more visible, and in general always have your light on when riding a electric unicycle. Next up, riding in broad daylight is pretty much the optimum for riding in general. There's not really much to comment about here. But when riding in the night, it's really important to have additional lighting or good lighting or your EUC. For example, on this V11, I have really awesome lighting. I don't really need additional lighting, but I still have it just for notifying drivers when I go across the street. So I usually use a helmet light and I turn it on if I go close to the intersection, possibly just point the beam on the street to let the car see that something is coming up. Also, in smaller electric unicycles which don't have such a good light, it's great to have additional lighting because then you will see potholes or danger in front of you. And I gotta tell you, this is really, really important because nothing is more annoying than going into a pothole that you just didn't see. So use additional lighting in the night. This will help you out a lot. Also, taillights are very important, especially on EUCs that don't have a good taillight, like for example, the V12. And then just buy, I don't know, like a Gasaron W10 BS or some sort of LED strips in the back or some sort of blinky lights on your hands or on your helmet, like a Guardian Angel light, because these things just help out massively. And especially putting lights on your helmet is helpful because some cars are, you know, higher up and they won't be able to see the lower lights from a certain distance. So yeah, this is important. When riding in the night, shine bright with a light out of fright. Because cars aren't polite. No, I'm kidding. No, that's not like that. I think majority of people or of drivers is pretty good, but sometimes well, there is also bad drivers. Okay, let's move on to the next point, which is weather conditions. In terms of riding in sunny weather and, you know, sunshine, no clouds in the sky, there isn't really much to comment about other than something might be hidden in the shade when you're going on the bike path, like some sort of bump that you might not see. But other than that, there's really not much to comment here. I think that the optimal weather for riding is like slightly overcast, then you can also see everything the best. And also, as said, keep your lights on. When riding in the rain, most importantly, use a electric unicycle that is waterproof, like for example this in motion, and you'll have to also adjust your speeds to the weather conditions. So go a bit slower, it might be a bit more slippery, but in my experience it's not actually that slippery to ride in rain, but it's still worse than, of course, when the weather is dry. Your vision might be also a bit more limited due to rain and riding in goggles, so wipe your goggles regularly or your visor. I have even some gloves that have a built-in wiper. So that is really cool, but you have to keep in mind that also the vision of other road users is limited, most notably cars. So use some additional lighting, use some external lighting, maybe some reflectors, and then it will be safer. When riding in snow, you have to keep the speed down even more and especially avoid sudden movements. I made a whole video about riding in snow, so you might check that out. But to sum it up, it's not really difficult to ride EUC in snow. It's actually easier than on an electric scooter. You just need to make no sudden movements, but as said, feel free to check out my other video on that. Last but not least, when riding in moist climates or very wet climates, when it's foggy, for example, your visor or your goggles might fog up from the inside. So the best method for this is just to have a pin lock installed on your visor. So it's like a second layer of like plastic, it's not really glass, on the visor. And you can also get double layered goggles for your full face helmet. Now, the thing is that sometimes if you wear glasses like me, not the visor will fog up, but your glasses. So for this, it's best to either, I know, use some sort of spray on your glasses, but I never really did that. Better just to get contact lenses, and this is my best method for riding through the winter when it's really easy to fog up glasses and visors or goggles. So that's it about the weather conditions. Now let's talk about the specifics of a group ride. Group rides can be really a lot of fun with music and happiness and just joyful gliding with other people. But there are some things to keep in mind when joining them. For example, it's really easy to get carried away and either go too fast or not see something or just go past your comfort zone. So it's really important to keep in mind what are your abilities, maybe push them a little, but don't push them too hard, because that's most oftentimes when you might crash. So don't get pushed into doing too stupid things and know your boundaries. It's also important to keep distance to others, because you might just by accident hit someone with your foot plate, or you might just bump into someone. Now, sometimes you can rescue it, but it's always a kind of terrifying experience. So be sure to leave at least like 1 meter or 2 meters, so 3 feet or 6 feet of distance to the rider next to you, or even more to the rider in front of you. If an amount of people just goes a route that you don't accept, like for example speeding through a sidewalk or doing something else, just don't join them. It's not the end of the world. You can reunite with them later or talk about those issues. Don't, as said, be pushed into things you really don't want to do. Last but not least, you need to be very conscious about your surroundings and what is happening, and also don't get too deep into conversations when riding, because more often than not, just a conversation might throw you off and suddenly there's something appearing in front of you and you fall. So it's good to have the conversations when you stop, but maybe just a little when you are riding. With that said, that's everything about the group rides. If you have any other comments about group rides, feel free to comment below. Now let's talk about the last category, which is accessories or gear that might be really useful. First up on the list is something that I talked about earlier already, which is additional lighting. Be it a blinking light on your helmet, additional lighting for riding in the night, like a more powerful light, shred lights, gasoline lights, O-lights. Any lighting does really help on your EUC. Keep in mind though not to use some sort of extreme floodlights, because they might blind others really a lot. If you want to have a separate video just about lighting on EUCs, feel free to comment below. Next up, it's really important to have reflectors, and if your jacket is dark and it doesn't have any reflectors, just feel free to wear a reflective vest, because this goes a long way for safety, especially in the night. And if you're in the market for some sort of new jacket, motorcycle jacket, or some sort of accessory, just look out for the reflectors, because it's really cool to have them built in to your gear. Next up, it's also great to have some sort of bright clothing and gear. That's also why I choose typically white or some sort of reddish, yellowish, orange-ish clothing for the gear that I use. My helmet is all colorful. My other helmet is like white and black. The third helmet I have is also like red, white, gray, and gray. It's it might be very tempting to look super cool and Batman-like with black stuff, but it's actually very dangerous to be on the road like that, because in one case you will just see like a small light of your electric unicycle, and in the other case you will see a whole human being because of the colors and the reflection. So wear bright colors. I think this is the new cool. It's also great to have a helmet with a visor or with goggles. This will save you from bugs flying into your face and this causing an accident, or tree branches going into your eyes. Just wear a helmet with goggles or a visor. I think I didn't realize I didn't talk much about in this video is also potholes, and potholes are the best to cover with power pads. So any wheel I use now, I have power pads. Be it these, which I'm not the biggest fan of these Shoei market pads, but I'll get different ones very soon. But power pads are very important because they make you not fall off from the wheel. So power pads are really important. If you have enough time, for example, in front of a pothole, you can jump over the pothole with this. And if you go into the pothole and the EUC just, bounces into it and then out of it, there's a much greater chance to not fall if you have power pads on. So any wheel you ride, especially faster wheels, power pads are a must-have. A very nice addition, maybe not a must-have, but something that makes your ride also safer, are foot plates like those Nylonowe are my favorite, which have like holes inside here, so if you're riding in snow or mud or in rain, everything just goes through them, and they have also spikes, which is way better than grip tape and makes you not fall off the wheel either. And last but not least, generally the bigger the EUC or the bigger the tire diameter, the safer you will feel on the road. And especially here with the suspension, V11 revisit is coming up, I feel very safe on the road, especially if I might hit a pothole or some bigger bumps on the road. So the bigger the EUC, usually the bigger the weight, and if it has also suspension, the safer you will feel on the road. With that said, I think that turned out to be a longer video than expected, but I hope you still enjoy it. If you have any additional comments, please leave them below. And if you're still here, leave a like on the video, subscribe to see more content like this. I'll see you in the next video. See you soon.